All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Bootcamp. This is going to be a pretty in-depth video on our multi-keyword placement rules. So in the previous video, we went over the single keyword placement rules, which are a bit easier to understand. I definitely go back and watch that video first. If you haven't yet, it's in the Bootcamp. It's 4C. So go back and watch that. It'll go over the optimization score, which is right here. That's also applicable in this video as well. I'm not going to go over it because I went over it in that video, but it helps you establish which campaigns to set up and run these rules for, because you may not want to run them for the sake of this example, all of your multi-keyword campaign rules. That may be a little crazy, but picking one or two that have high potential. That's kind of the goal of that score, to quickly figure out what those are. And anyway, in this video, we're going to be going over how to set up this kind of multi-step rule. And said in layman's terms, you're trying to balance all of the bids that the multi-keyword campaign is bidding at relative to the average. So you've got an average bid across all of those base bids, and you're trying to kind of juggle all of those in addition to the performance at each of the placement levels to hit a target ACOS. So a lot of variables at play here. It's pretty complex. I'll walk you through kind of step by step in this video, simplistic examples. Hopefully you can understand how it works. And then I'll show you a few tweaks that you can do to kind of hedge towards specific placements if you have some apparent trends that, for example, your top of search is always performing better in the multi-keyword campaigns, kind of how to throttle against those. So let me hop into an example here. First, let's talk about how to set up autopilot. This is the gist of how you want to go about setting it up. There's another tweak here that I'll show you at the end where you can kind of override and make the placement modifier just for specific placements, but we'll do this first example just set up this way. So what we've got is the multi-keyword placement modifier rule is set to balance. That means it's potentially going to set modifiers for all of your placements if the logic calculates out to that case. And then for the base bid, it's always going to be balanced because we're basically normalizing all the base bids. So if you're setting this up from scratch, you're going to see it down here at the bottom where there's going to be a balance option for the modifiers, and there's also going to be a top of search, product page, rest of search, Amazon business for the modifiers. You would select that in combination with this base bid rule if you want to only adjust one of them. So that's just kind of a quick blanket way to only adjust one modifier and kind of hedge towards that. But in this example, I'm going to set both to balance, and this just ensures that all of our modifiers will get adjusted, and then all of the base bids would get adjusted if, again, the logic kind of dictates that. So with that, you also need to establish your campaign override campaign names. So you just list them like this with a carriage return in between each one. And I think on PC, it's Control Enter to drop down a line, and Mac, it's Command Enter. But basically, yeah, just put the list of campaign names in there. All right, and then same thing with the base bid logic rule, just mirror that like that. All right, and then both of these rows actually get the target ACOS. You'll see how those, the target ACOS is used in the calculation steps here in just a moment, where the single keyword, you only need to put it in the placement modifier rule. So here's kind of what we're working with here. And then I like to also, just for the fun of it, put greater than 1 for the keyword count. We are using overrides in this case, so that's not really needed, but I just kind of do it as a matter of habit. So anyway, here's kind of your setup. All right, and then all you'll do is run that. So I'm going to quickly run it. Hit yes. All right, so hit OK, and we can see now that 6 modifiers have been adjusted and 57 keywords. So now I'm going to hop over, and I've got a little bit of a kind of worksheet example set up. You can see our placement modifiers here are the rule number 3 that were adjusted, and then we've got our keyword level bids that were normalized and adjusted here is rule number 4. Now, in this demo data, I actually do not have the Amazon business placement. So in your data, you will have 4 placements that could potentially be adjusted. And you can see here are updates where it adjusted top of search to 83%, rest of search 22, and then adjusted to these new red bids here from the original that are shown here in black. Now I've kind of hidden some columns here just to not overcomplicate things because there's a lot of numbers involved with this logic that I'm going to attempt to explain. In the left here, I've got a kind of step-by-step explanation of each of the logic steps that you can follow along with. And then you can also open the guide here and kind of walk through each step here so you can really understand kind of what's going on, why it matters. But anyway, I wanted to work out a start to finish example just so it's crystal clear and you understand kind of where all your numbers are coming from. All right. So for step 1, all we're doing is dividing the revenue, which that's the same thing as sales. So you divide the sales divided by the clicks and putting that value right here. So that's all we've done in step 1. All right, so if you do not have a sale, so like this one, for example, just to ensure things stay as distributed as possible across this campaign, we're taking the average revenue per click of all the converting keywords within the campaign. So in this example, the average revenue per click is 10. You can see you have some that are a lot higher, some that are lower. But what that'll do for these that don't have any orders, a lot of times the bid is consistently lower. It's going to bump them up, give them a chance to convert faster, as well as just kind of use that average based logic across the entire multi-keyword campaign. So this example here, this keyword, this 10.32 comes from the average revenue per click of all the converting revenue per clicks thus far in the logic. So that's where that comes from. All right, so step 2, we're right here. We're computing the base bid now. And pretty simple here to understand. We're basically just going to take the revenue per click, multiply that by our target ACOS, which in this case, we're talking about base bids. So that value is coming from right here, which is the base bid rule in the multi-keyword 2-step rule that we set up. So 30%. This one will be applied here later, but this one's where we're at right now. All right, so hopping back over, 3.44, basically that comes from multiplying this number by 0.3. That gives you 3.44, and we're just carrying that down across all the keywords. All right, and for there, the next thing we need to do is determine the max bid across all of those keywords. So you can see it's calculating the max bid, the average bid. So you need both of those to figure out the normalization of your keyword level bids. All right, so after we have that, then we can normalize the bids. And the normalization formula is right here. So you can see we're taking that base bid that we calculated in the prior step, dividing it by the max bid, and then multiplying it by the average bid. So I'd advise you to kind of go through some of these notes and wrap your brain around what's going on. Hopefully, after you go through this and read it, it'll make sense from a conceptual standpoint. And then as you go through some examples in your own campaigns, it'll register on kind of some of the adjustments that are getting made and why. All right. So we are at step 3. We've normalized our bids. These red bids become the bids you're seeing over here. All right. Now we're going to hop up and figure out the modifiers to set. So you can see 82 and 22, 83 and 22. That's just a rounding thing. So the way to get to these final values is first you calculate the revenue per click times target ACOS of each placement. So that's literally the sales divided by the clicks of each placement, which in your bulk file appear above the keywords. So revenue divided by the clicks. That's the RPC of each placement, which you see here. And then what we do from there is calculate the expected bid. So the expected bid. This calculates how much you'd be willing to bid at each placement to maintain your target ACOS. All right, so in this case, we're multiplying it by 0.3. This is where the 30% here comes into play. So now we're doing revenue per click times our target ACOS in the placement modifier level. All right. And in this example, you get 0.89, 1.87, and 1.25. And then finally, to calculate the modifiers, we're going to run it through a final formula here where you do take into account the normalized average base bid, which that is the red values. So we do need to calculate that, an average of that, which is right here. And then you would divide the expected bids divided by this average minus 1. And then we turn that into a percentage by multiplying it by 100. And that gives you your modifier calculation, where if it's 0, it could potentially be 0 because it's a negative number. So Amazon does not let you set negative modifiers, so we cap it at 0. So all of this to say, after you normalize your base bids, those become your new bids, and then calculating your revenue per click at a placement level, then figuring out the expected bid that you'd be willing to pay at each placement to maintain your target ACOS, in this case 30%. So that's what was done here. And then factoring in the average normalized bid to ensure the placement. So each of these keywords will be allowed to be boosted by, in this case, 82% on top of search, 22% on rest of search, to ensure we're hitting a 30% target ACOS across all of those placements. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because our targeting 30%, so you would expect a little bit of a boost for your rest of search, and ACOS of 9.4 right now, where we would expect more of a boost there. So now let me show you a few tweaks you can make to this logic. Really the one that I like the most is you have two options, and they're both done at the modifier level here. So one option is you could just change this to top of search. And if I rerun this now, you will see that instead of changing both top of search and rest of search, it basically only changes the top of search. So it's just kind of a fine tuning if you have a use case where you only ever want to continually optimize one placement. That's just a quick way of doing that. All right, and then the other kind of fine tuning tweak is if I put it back on balance and then change this override setting, I could accomplish the same thing by doing this. That would do the same thing as choosing this option. What this allows you to do, though, is also change only like 2 of them at a time. So if you want to, for example, only ever focus in on top of search and rest of search, you would set it up that way and rerun it. All right, and you can see now it's changing 2 of them, and then it's going to keep the others that you don't select as overrides. It's going to keep them at whatever they were before. So we've added a reference column for the old percentage in the sponsored product sheet, where if this one, for example, was set at 30 before and we just ran the overrides with top of search, rest of search, this one would be set at 30 as well. So it kind of ignores any of the other placements that you don't have overrides specified for. So again, just kind of another fine-tuning option if you have a use case for it. And yeah, hopefully this video was helpful in kind of explaining the logic. I guess I didn't really mention this whole section in this video is not going to be in your tool. This was just added to kind of help stair-step your way through this calculation because it is pretty complicated. Everything in ad tactics is done automatically for you. So it's calculating the base bids, it's calculating the percentages, and it's using the base bid and the placement level metrics in combination with your inputs here to run this calculation in bulk across all your campaigns. So yeah, hopefully this made sense. Again, I would say test small before you kind of expand out across your campaigns in this example, again, I just did it with 2 campaigns. Go back and watch the single keyword placement modifier video to learn more about the placement optimization score. I think that's pretty helpful in kind of prioritizing your campaigns to try to use these more advanced logic rules with them. And yeah, hopefully it helps in your business, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions on this. I know it is complex. If you have any feedback on some of these, we are continuing to test these across various accounts and just kind of iterate and improve upon them. So we welcome all feedback, and yeah, hope it helps. I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.